Well, the Seahawks 2020 schedule is out. We have already taken a look at it and can't wait to talk about it because we know that is what you are doing too. Welcome to the Seahawks Roundtable Conversation. We are going to take you through the Seahawks schedule and give you plenty to talk about ahead of the 2020 season. I am Jen Mueller, sideline reporter for the Seattle Seahawks, joined today by John Boyle from Seahawks.com. Hey, John.
Hey, Jen. How are you?
Awesome to be able to talk football and to look ahead. I'm excited for it.
It's very exciting.
Dave Wyman, a former Seahawks linebacker and one of my broadcast partners on the Seahawks broadcast, will be with us. Hey, Dave.
Nice to see all you guys. Yeah, how you doing, Jen?
I could not be better. Sunshine football conversations with my guys. It makes me feel good.
There you go. That's all you need.
And rounding out the squad today is Michael Bumpus, former receiver and one of our Seahawks insiders during the week. He is also part of the Seahawks pre- and post-game show. Bump, what do you got for us today?
Doing all right. Surviving, homeschooling, 3 kids. Got to play zone defense, but it's working out.
We are all developing new skill sets during this time, Bump. That's really all I can say. But football does give us a sense of normalcy. Look, I know that everybody has looked at the schedule. I just want to give a few of the highlights before we dive into what this means and what each one of us noticed first on the schedule. So just as a recap, the Seahawks will start week 1 in Atlanta against Dan Quinn and the Falcons. They will play 4 primetime games this year. They will play 4 of their 6 division games before November 15th. A week 6 bye for the Seahawks comes a little bit early, but then they'll have a little mini bye, as they call it, following a Thursday night game in November. The season will end with a home game against the Rams and then on the road against the 49ers. Of course, everybody is looking ahead to those final 2 games because of what it could potentially mean and thinking back to how the regular season ended last year against the 49ers. There is a lot to dive into. Michael Bumpus, let's start with you. That road schedule for the Seahawks is interesting, potentially challenging with the miles traveled.
Yeah, that's the first thing that kind of stood out to me, Jen. I look at this schedule and I'm like, okay, they're going to Atlanta, they're going to Miami, they're going to Washington, D.C. I mean, these guys are going to be road warriors. Thankfully, last year they proved that they can be successful on the road. They were 7-1. Then I look at the schedule, I'm like, these guys can legit win every game on the road. I don't know when's the last time that's happened. I don't know the likelihood of that. But looking at the schedule, it definitely favors them on the road. Then my other question was, okay, how are they going to do in this 10 a.m. slot? I know when I played with the Hawks, we went back east and we got smacked every time we did. This is a different group. I don't think it really phases them that much, but they have to have looked at the schedule and say, we're going to be on the road a lot, over 29,000 miles. They better bring their headphones, their neck braces, whatever you do when you sleep on the plane, because, man, they're going to be racking up those miles for sure.
The Seahawks will be traveling more than any other team in the NFL, as Bump said, almost 30,000 miles in the air. And Dave, there's a fun fact. I don't know if it's fun or not, maybe just an interesting fact about the Seahawks in Florida.
Yeah, we had somebody bring that up yesterday on our show, and I go back to 2006 is the last time the Seahawks have won in the state of Florida. Remember in 2012, Bobby Wagner, I think Bobby got an interception in the end zone against Miami, and it was nullified because Earl's hand came down and hit the helmet. And I just remember being very frustrated by that. Tampa Bay, remember Bradley McDougald picked off Russell Wilson. I think that was 15 or 16 when he was playing for the Buccaneers. So, yeah, you have to go back to Tampa Bay 06. It was the last game of the year when they won in the state of Florida. But, Bob talked about all the travel. This wasn't a problem last year. And I have to say, everybody has asked me as a player, when I look at the schedule, what stood out to me, what was I always looking for? To me, I was always looking for, is it going to be hot? That was the only thing that ever bothered me, because I would get dehydrated and it was just tough. When 1989, we opened up in Philadelphia and it was so hot that there was like heat waves coming up off the field. And I just hated that. Don't care about cold. You can always get warmer, but I hated the heat. So, now I'm just looking, they don't, at Atlanta, at Miami. Atlanta, of course, is inside. So, but at Miami, October 4th, maybe that's going to be, a little bit warm there. But look, they conquered the road deal last year, and 10 a.m. starts. They went 5-0, and it started in Pittsburgh. Everybody got on the early bus. Remember that, Jen? And that became like a thing. And then everybody started believing in it, and next thing you know, they're 7-1 on the road.
I would like to say that I look at the exact opposite. I look to see where the cold weather games are going to be played to figure out how much I'm going to have to pack in November and December to stay
nice
warm.
And warm
on
up in the booth, Jen.
I love how you guys remind me of that during the game. John Boyle is also upstairs out of the elements in those games. But John, something else stuck out to you when you looked at the schedule. I think you were looking a little maybe closer to home for division opponents.
Yeah, I mean, I just think in general, this division is going to be really tough. We've seen it over the years. Pretty much every year the Seahawks have been in contention. There's always been at least one other kind of top dog, and it's rotated through. But, I mean, there's legitimately a chance, especially with this add wild card, that we see 3 playoff teams come out of the division. We obviously all know what San Francisco did last year. They've retained a lot of guys. They've added some talent. I don't see them falling off. The Rams just fell short of the playoffs. We know they're looking to bounce back. And then Arizona, look, they didn't have a great season last year, but to me, every year we see those teams that go from missing the playoffs to big bounce back seasons. Second year in their system under a new head coach, second year with Kyler Murray. You go back and look at the last couple MVPs, they've been second year quarterbacks who make that big jump. Now, I'm not saying Kyler Murray is going to be the MVP, but I do think it's fair to say, especially when you give him DeAndre Hopkins, that he's going to be a lot better. They've got some good weapons on defense. I just think there's going to be no easy games in this division. And to a degree, that's true no matter what every year, but especially this year, I think all 4 of these teams could legitimately be playoff contenders.
So let's take a look at just difficulty of schedule overall. And I want to get you guys to weigh in on this. And John, start with you. When you take a look at the schedule, only 6 teams on the entire schedule made the playoffs in 2019. And if you take a look at the end of the Seahawks schedule, 4 of the last 5 games that they play, they're not going to face a playoff team, right? So depending on how you look at the schedule, there's some real advantages. How do you grade strength of schedule for this?
Yeah, I mean, I always go into those with you take it with a grain of salt, because of those 4 teams you mentioned that aren't playoff teams last year, I'll bet you 1 or 2 of them will be, just the way the NFL works. By November, some team that we think was great is going to be mediocre, and some team that we thought was kind of meh is going to be a playoff team. So I don't necessarily try to play that game of, this and that, but I do like that they finished, they got 3 of 4 at home before that game in San Francisco. So they set up well to potentially, position themselves well for what we all assume will be a very meaningful Week 17 game. But yeah, I mean, I think there's some challenges throughout, but it's, it's definitely not on the schedules where you look at and you're like, oh, they got screwed. There's not that big stretch of like multiple road games in a row, or, I remember in 2016, it was, you're catching New England off a bye and you're on a short week because you played on Monday. Now they won that game, but there aren't a lot of those obvious games where you feel like you have a lot to complain about.
Yeah, you've only got a back-to-back road swing once during the year. That is Week 9 playing at Buffalo, and then Week 10 playing at the Rams in their new stadium. So while you're on the road, at least it's not back-to-back East Coast trips. Bump, when you look at the schedule and you look at strength of schedule, do you mark down like W and L? Do you try to predict what's going to happen?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, that's all part of the offseason, right? Speculation is a beautiful thing. We all have our opinions and stuff. And I look at the schedule, and the only team that really strikes fear into me is the Dallas Cowboys, just because of what they can do offensively. You have a Dak Prescott. I know Dave loves Dak Prescott. I'm right there with him. You got a Cooper and a Gallup on the outside, and then they got CeeDee Lamb, a kid who I didn't think was going to be there by the time Dallas was able to pick up. They get the receiver out of Oklahoma, and let's not forget Ezekiel Elliott. Then you combine that with that offensive line, who's been one of the better offensive lines in the past few years, that addresses one of the weaknesses in this defense right now, that defensive line. So there's so many different matchups there to where I look at the schedule, and that's the one game that pops out at me. Other than that, I think they're all winnable games. I think every game in NFL is winnable, but the one that sticks out to me the most is Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys, and the Hawks owe them one because they bumped them out the playoffs a couple years ago.
Yeah, so that's the opponent that I think maybe makes you most anxious. But Dave, that's the one that you're looking forward to most.
Dallas, you're talking about?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I love watching Dallas play, but it's a home game, right? So I mean that definitely helps. But yeah, Dak Prescott, maybe Matt Ryan, maybe Carson Wentz. Those three guys, maybe the toughest quarterbacks that you face on the schedule. But there's a lot of young guys. There's a lot of youth in the AFC East with, I just heard Bill Belichick talking about, he was trying to sell everybody on Jared Stidham. Never heard of him, but we'll see what happens. And then, what you've got Sam Darnold, you got Kyler Murray still coming on. And so, yeah, there's a lot of youth, but there's some pretty decent quarterbacks that you're going to face, like in the opener at Atlanta, Matt Ryan. It'll be interesting to see if Dan Quinn's able to bring that team back around. But yeah, some decent quarterbacks there, but nothing, that's too scary. I mean, unfortunately, New England's coming to town and they're not bringing Tom Brady, which I was excited to see Brady. I thought it was really cool in 2012 when he came. But yeah, there's not that many tough quarterbacks on this schedule. So if you want to look at it that way, but I said that yesterday on our show, and somebody texted in and said, well, the defense still has to get a pass rush on those guys, and and I think a lot of it's about coverage as well. But it's going to be challenging no matter what.
When you mention, defense still has to get the pass rush, here's one of the notes that I wrote down. Defense typically is ahead of the offense when the season starts because offense is learning a scheme. It doesn't matter who's new. You're still trying to get together. Defense can go out there and just kind of play, I guess, for lack of a better description. Bump, how much do you put in that, especially when you look at it's the Falcons, the Patriots, granted without Tom Brady, but the Cowboys weeks 1, 2, and 3, where even if the offense isn't clicking and even if the defense has room to go, there's still an opportunity to take advantage of kind of where offense and defense is.
Yeah, typically that's the case, right? You start camp and you see that the defense is flying around and the offensive coaches are stopping practice and putting guys in the right spots and really talking about, their assignment. But when I looked at camp last year, I felt the complete opposite. I felt like the offense was so much more ahead and the defense kind of had to pick up the slack because of the movements and pieces and stuff that they're doing over there. And I would expect the same. And I think that's how the season was last year. Russell Wilson, that offense, were going, they were clicking, and the defense is giving up 500 yards to Schaub and the Atlanta Falcons and stuff, and the offense had to pick up the slack. And I anticipate that as well. And I think that they're okay with the offense running the show. You have a Russell Wilson. Hopefully you have a Chris Carson and a Penny. You have a DK and a Lockett. All these marquee names, all the big play names are on the offensive side of the ball, and you have one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So I expect the same thing. You don't know if Clowney's going to be here. Jaron Reed is finally going to get himself going, hopefully, and be available when the regular season starts. You got a Dunbar coming in. Where's Trey Flowers going to play? How's Shaq going to be this year? What's Puna look? There's a lot of questions on this defensive side of the ball. So I would expect the offense to get going. If the defense surprises everybody and they get going and they're the ones to lead the show, I think that's better off for this team. But I expect the offense to kind of lead the charge and do the same thing they did last year.
Dave, are you going to refute my thought too and agree with Bump?
Well, it would be nice if the defense was, I hope you're right, Jen. I hope the defense is ahead because they're the ones that really need to improve the most. And, it's funny, everybody was talking about, pass rush this year and the lack of it, but that also, there's a coverage element. And Bump, this. I mean, you mentioned Quentin Dunbar coming in here, who I know Paul Moyer broke down, really likes him. Paul, the old DB coach. So, yeah, I think a lot of it was coverage. Also, a lot of it last year was the way they played defense. They just weren't very aggressive. They kind of laid back and played more of a rope-a-dope type of defense, kind of a soft zone. And they're really, if you go back and look at the season, yeah, there was, 28 sacks, and that was second worst in the NFL. There wasn't a lot of time to get to the quarterback. The ball was coming out really fast. So, I would love to see that. But, that's going to be reliant on the last couple drafts and this draft too, with 2 defensive ends coming in and a linebacker. These guys are going to have to step up. They had the Green Bay game on the other day on NFL Network, the Fail Mary game in 2012. Sorry, that was not a catch. With me. But you look at that defense and how young they were and how fast and how ferocious they were. And a lot of those guys were in their first, second, third year, Bruce Irvin and, Cam Chancellor and Bobby Wagner. That was Bobby's rookie year. And, that defense was so fast and they stepped up this 18, 19, 2020 draft class defensively, all need to step up this year and become what that defense was back in 2012, 13.
And if we can do that, John Boyle. That goes a long way towards reclaiming a division title. How do you see the way the division, as far as games matching up with the schedule, how the Seahawks are catching them? And I think maybe what we should be talking about is just strength of the NFC West in general.
Yeah, I mean, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I don't think there's going to be any of the 4 teams in the NFC West that are out of contention and just playing for pride come November, December. I mean, the old cliche is every division game is tough, and that's always true. But I really believe this year that you could see the Seahawks. They play close games in general, but I think you could see them play 6 games against division teams that all come down to the wire and that all are really meaningful. I mean, when I look at the schedule, that November 1st game just jumps out of, at that point, they'll have only played the 1 division game against Arizona. By November, we kind of start to get a feel for who these teams are. And now, boom, here comes the 49ers, a team that you literally went down to the final inch of the season to decide the division. And no one's going to win the NFC West on November 1st, but that'll be kind of a fun little tone setter to see where both those teams are at and maybe kind of see who's got the leg up going into the second half of the season where things get really interesting.
Well, and what I like about where the Cardinals game is the week before that Niners game you're talking about. So the Seahawks bye comes in week 6. The Seahawks are 7-3 following bye weeks under Pete Carroll, and the Cardinals are coming off of that bye for the Seahawks. So I do like that.
And John, they do pretty well in Arizona as well, which is, their history there. They haven't lost there since Russell Wilson's rookie year. So, they go in there feeling confident, which helps.
Yeah, and I don't, John, before I get to Bump and Wyman on this one, what do you think about that week 6 bye?
I mean, look, you don't necessarily love it. Well, you always have to see how injuries play out too, because there's been years where an early bye helps because you have somebody, a key player who's playing through an ankle sprain or a hamstring injury, and that rest helps. But ultimately, the goal is to be playing into February, and if you are, that means you're playing a lot of consecutive games with that week 6 bye. You'd love, the week 10, week 11. But, as Pete Carroll would always say, you control, play the schedule you're dealt, and, they'll take advantage of it as best they can. It does help that Thursday game is kind of a nice gap of you play 4 or 5 games, I believe it is, and then you get what, as you call it, the mini bye. So they'll get a little rest there later in the season before that Monday nighter in Philly.
Bump, how long does it take for a player to identify where that bye week is when the schedule comes out?
Depends on the player. Me personally, I looked at the whole schedule. Like you said, I tallied the wins, I tallied the losses, where the bye is going to be. And for me, I would like for the bye to be week 9, right in the middle of the schedule. When you talk to coaches, they break down the schedule in quarters, right? Win the first quarter, win the second quarter. So, for me, I would like it to be in the middle of the season. But like John said, it's all contingent on the health of your team. Sometimes a week 9 bye is perfect. A week 6 bye, is going to be perfect for someone on the team. Is it going to be perfect for the majority or the minority of the team? It all depends, man. That's the beautiful thing about this game is week by week, situations change, the health of football team changes. But if I was a coach, week 9 would be solid for me. But then I'm just a coach. I'm not playing. My body's not hurt. Dave, you probably know all about that.
Yeah, the thing about the bye week, my first year in Denver, we had 2 bye weeks, and I did not like the bye week as a player because I never wanted to sample anything that felt like the off season. I didn't want to go on vacation. I didn't want to do anything because there's a certain amount of misery that you commit yourself to when you go into a season. You're going to be hurt. You love it, and you're going to play through the pain and everything, but you don't want to sample like a trip to a beach or anything like that to me. And so I never really, liked the bye weeks that much. I just wanted to get into it, kind of get my momentum going. And then the other thing I would say about, the placement of it, it seems like it's always works out okay, right? There's always a reason, I feel like every year, whether it's in week 5 or week 6 or 8 or whatever, we go, wow, it's a good thing they got this, the bye week here because isn't the pup list, isn't that 6 weeks? So I mean that's right at the 6-week mark for any player that would be on the pup list. And then somebody a lot cuter than me just got on screen there, that's for sure.
This was to break up a fight between siblings, so yeah,
there you go.
She's gonna come sit here so they don't fight each other.
Okay. Yeah, anyway, I feel like the bye week always works out. You find a way to make it work, and like I said, if somebody coming off the pup list now, give them an extra week to get healthy, and hopefully it works out for the Seahawks.
Another part of the schedule, and I know we all look at bye weeks differently and whether it's actually a mini bye or not when you have to play on a short week for a Thursday night game. John, if you can pop in right now, how do you see the division of home versus away games? Because we mentioned how good the Seahawks were on the road last year. They haven't had that same winning percentage at CenturyLink Field. Does the schedule make that more favorable for them this year?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that Dallas game. Could Ruby quiet, please, up and down. The Dallas game is arguably their toughest opponent, so that, for that one to be at home makes the getting back to winning at home a little tougher. But that's one of the things, if you listen to Pete Carroll last year talk about like that, I mean, 4-4 at home, that's really unacceptable for them. So they need to figure out a way to get better in that. And one thing I think helps is they get 3 of those in primetime. And this traditionally has been a very good team in primetime. So if they can, get those 3 right there and then take care of business in some of the others, yeah, I mean, you look, 7-1 on the road is awesome. I mean, that's the best they've ever done, but you can't count on that every year. And to be a team that's consistently going to the playoffs, winning your division, potentially playing for a bye, you need to be a lot better home than 4-4. And that's, when I look, that was one of the first things when I looked at the schedules. They got to take care of business at home. They can't be, a 500 team again.
The Seahawks are 29-7-1 in primetime games under Pete Carroll. Dave, when you know how good the Seahawks were on the road, does that send a different message to opponents who are also looking at their schedule and knowing the Seahawks can come in and play in the early time spot and dominated opponents in their own stadium?
Yeah, I suppose if you look at that, I would say on the flip side, I'm not looking at the schedule thinking about who's good on the road, but I think that more than anything, you know that Pete Carroll is going to have his team prepared, and that's the thing. Like I said last year, I felt like, Jen, you remember being on those trips that the guys went over on the early bus. It just became a thing, right? It's nothing. I mean, if they'd all got on the late bus, they might have still gone 7-1, but on the road, but they made it into something. And just if you football players are very superstitious, and also they feel like there are certain traditions that work for them, and so the Seahawks just believed, and all that comes from Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll is a guy that convinces. I mean, why are they so good in primetime games? Why are they so good coming off of a loss? Why is it that they're 56-0 when they're 4 points ahead? I mean, Pete Carroll is him and Russell Wilson. I feel like they're kindred spirits, and they just will their team to just believe in things and believe in themselves. So I think if you're any of these opponents and you see Seattle coming into town, you're going to be a little bit concerned, no matter what their road record is. But I guarantee you, a lot of these coaches of the opponents are going to say, "Hey, this team went 7-1 on the road last year, so this is not going to be some kind of cakewalk coming in here just because it's a home game."
Are you surprised that they didn't get an additional primetime game?
Oh, yeah. And I thought for sure a 49ers game matchup was going to be a primetime game. The 49ers and Seahawks have become a rivalry again, and it's fun to watch. 2 games they played last year, and combined, I think 6 or 7 points separated the team. One game went into overtime. The other game was a 21-26 game and had a bunch of implications on it. So I was a little disappointed. I think that's good for football. I think it's good for both organizations and franchises. So I was surprised that the 49ers wasn't on a primetime game.
Now, it still could be, we should point out, that could always get flexed, and it would not surprise me at all if the final week of the regular season is flexed into prime time, giving the Seahawks that 5th primetime game. Bump, since you had it and you were talking about those division opponents, what do you think happens to the Niners this year coming off of their Super Bowl appearance?
They got to figure some things out. They lose to Forrest Buckner. They sign Armstead, which is good. They lose Emmanuel Sanders to the Saints. And what that tells me, and then they draft that receiver out of Arizona State. I forgot his name. But Speed Demon, when the ball's in his hands, he's Ayuk. Thank you. He's ready to go. So they lost some guys, but they also brought some guys in as well. But now the secret's out. George Kittle is going to be their go-to guy. They have an amazing run game. They're not going to ask Jimmy Garoppolo to do a lot of stuff. So it's always hard to keep winning in the same fashion, in the same style. You have to adjust some things. So I expect them to adjust, but I also expect it to be a little harder for these guys. And especially after a team loses in the Super Bowl, I believe I look the last 20 years, maybe half of them have a winning record, and most of them don't go back to the Super Bowl. So if you look at stats, you look at history, the odds are against them. They have made some moves. I think teams are going to force Jimmy to make more plays, and he's going to have to make his money. He's a rich man right now. Now he's going to have to go out there and prove it.
Well, and Dave, what Bump just said about teams having a hard time making it back to the Super Bowl, we saw that with the Rams. What happens to the Rams this year, coming off of a down year for them?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see if Arizona actually surpasses them, and becomes a bigger threat than the Rams. I would say this, though, either way, that is a bad matchup for the Seahawks. It has tended to be. One of their worst home losses in the Pete Carroll era came at the hands of in 2017 in the Rams. So it just seems like it's always not a great matchup. But man, the way they've kind of mortgaged their future with their draft picks and things like that, it does look like the way Arizona feels like they're kind of going to surpass the Rams and be, maybe the second toughest threat there. We'll see. Again, their offense, the way they run it, I do criticize Jared Goff quite a bit, but he's pretty good. He throws a pretty good deep ball. And I always say I feel like if he doesn't have Sean McVay in his ear, he can't think. But they've done a pretty good job against the Seahawks. And really, the one time they beat them up here last year, it was a pretty close game. So, like I said, division matchups are always such a curious thing, I mean, really look at, for whatever reason, the 49ers, that was a great matchup for the Seahawks. And I feel like if they'd had Will Dissly and Chris Carson in that Green Bay game, we'd have gone back down to that NFC Championship game down to San Francisco and beat them again. Because, they were 1 foot away from beating the team that went to the Super Bowl and winning the NFC West. So, yeah, the matchups are a very interesting thing. And for that reason, I'll always think that the LA Rams game is going to be a tough one.
John Boyle, you get to weigh in on the Cardinals as you've done already. But what I want you to just give us a quick prediction is, how much better can Kyler Murray get in year 2?
Oh, quite a bit. I mean, I think any player, you always hear coaches say year 1 to year 2 is frequently the biggest jump. And I think that's especially true for a guy who's starting as a rookie at quarterback, just the complexities of that system. The head coach is going through it all as well. And as I said earlier, now you give Kyler Murray one of the best 2 or 3 receivers in the NFL to throw to, and the ageless Larry Fitzgerald still there. So, yeah, I think we're going to see, again, I don't necessarily think he's going to be the year 2 MVP like we've seen the last couple of years out of some quarterbacks, but I think he's going to be quite a bit better. And that defense has some good weapons. They went out and added, when you're watching the draft and a team in your division gets somebody, you're like, oh man, that Isaiah Simmons is that way. You're like, man, he's that guy that you don't know how they're going to use him, but he just looks like he could be a special playmaker. So they've always been a tough team for the Seahawks, and I just see that getting tougher. So as I've said earlier, I think there's 4 playoff contenders in the division.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you look and you go, man, I can't wait to see that guy just as a football fan. And then you realize,
but wait,
I'm seeing that guy twice.
Why couldn't he be in the AFC North or something?
Exactly. Okay, 2 rapid fire questions for all 3 of you to wrap up this conversation. Here's what I want you to give me. First time through, it is the quarterback that you are most looking forward to see on the Seahawks schedule. And the second time through, we're going to go with the player that you are most looking forward to seeing. So 2 different categories there. John, I'm going to put you on the spot first. Quarterback that you most want to see this year.
We talked about him earlier, but I'll go with Dak Prescott for a few reasons. One, I thought of this when we were talking about the defense earlier and, how long does the defense take to come along? That, a week 3 contest against one of the best offenses in the NFL, that's going to be kind of a benchmark game, in my opinion, for this Seahawks defense. We know that's been the big focus of they need to get better on defense. Well, we're going to get a pretty good idea come week 3 and against Dak Prescott and all his weapons, how far they've come. And then, his contract situation makes it where if he doesn't get a deal done, you're going to be talking about a really motivated quarterback as well. And we know for some players that fires them up even more. So, yeah, I would put him number 1.
Dave, what you got?
Well, he stole Dak Prescott from me. So
actually, let me go first.
I want to watch Dak Prescott.
Hey, no, you know what? Actually, I got a good one here. hopefully by week 4, Tua Tagovailoa will be playing for the Miami Dolphins. I'd love to see that kid. I really don't want to watch Josh Rosen. So that will be, and if I can't have him, then I think Kyler Murray is always really fun to watch.
Bump.
Yeah, well, I was going to go Dak, then I was going to go Tua. So now I'm going to go Jimmy, man. Jimmy, who are you? Who are you really? What are you going to do? Are you going to take the next step in your career? This is really maybe like his second or third true season being a starter, and he has to improve just like a Kyler Murray has to improve. So I want to see what this guy does, what his off season has been like. Has he built some chemistry with Debo and killing all those guys? Can he take the next step? Jimmy, who the heck are you?
Okay, one more time through, but this time it's just player in general that you're most looking forward to seeing. John Boyle, I'm going to open it up for you.
Let's see. I mean, part of me wants to say Aaron Donald every year, even though he's terrible to play against, because we're watching, an all-time great. I mean, this is a guy who will go down as one of the best defensive players, not just of his era, but of all time. So anytime you get to see him, and then going back to a name I've mentioned, again, not a guy you want to play against as an opponent, but DeAndre Hopkins, just special talent. So I would point to those two just in terms of, it's always a treat as a football fan to see the best in the business play, and those are two of them. And sorry if taking 2 is cheating.
Well, you're going to have to take it up with Dave and Bump. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say the rookie down in Arizona, Isaiah Simmons, watching him at the combine run like a 4.3 something. The guy's a linebacker. I think they got pretty dangerous. They have a pretty good pass rusher down there already, and so I think that guy is going to be interesting to watch just because he's such a freakish athlete.
Bump, bring it home.
I'm going to go with CeeDee Lamb. I'm a receiver guy. Got to go with a receiver. Not only does he have the composure to snatch his phone from his girl during an NFL draft, he gets to learn from a Dak Prescott, a Cooper, a Gallup. I think this dude, I just couldn't believe he was still on the board when Dallas was up. So CeeDee Lamb started his career with a bang, was snatching his phone. Let's see what he does on the field.
All right, we will take it. Michael Bumpus, Dave Wyman, John Boyle, thank you for giving us some insight into the 2020 schedule. That'll do it for our roundtable conversation today. Make sure that you check out Seahawks.com for all the latest news on the schedule and for information when season tickets go on sale. We'll be back with you again soon.